Well, hello, my good friends from the internet. I just want to say thank you for being here. And in this mini course, I'm going to show you exactly how to use the Django framework and build an awesome web application. Right? This application is called the adoption or pet adoption. That's what it's called. You'll be able to start from scratch and learn about Django, the basics, how Django works, how fast you can spin up a website with Django. Django is Python based, which means you'll have to understand Python, but no worries. If you don't know much about Python, I do have another course that is dedicated to Python. Now, the main idea of this mini course is that I'm not going to go into too many details about Django. If you're interested in learning more about Django with more details, with more features, more than what I'm going to show you in this mini course, then go ahead and follow the link in the description. That way, when the course is ready, because I'm still working on it, it's going to be probably about 15 to 18 hours, I believe, or more, or maybe a little bit less, of full content. So the course is going to take you from zero to building a full-fledged application, Django application, with authentication, validation, with everything that you need to know, as well as learning how to deploy that full application to a server somewhere where you can then share the link so people can enjoy your website. So this is what we're going to be doing in this mini course. At the end of this course, you will have built, I should say, this very awesome application here. So the idea is very simple. It's a pet adoption website, which allows users to come in and look at some of the pets. And if they like them, they can go ahead and look at details and then be able to enter their email to express interest. So you can say, for instance, me@me.com. Hello, I like this pet. How do I adopt her? All right, very good. So they're going to go submit, and the message is going to be sent to the back end where the admin is going to be able to look at that message and then, of course, do what needs to be done to get started. Of course, that is something that we didn't apply or we didn't implement, but you get the idea. So you see that we are using Bootstrap here to make this really nice interface here, and all of these images and everything, and all of these also are added in the back end by an admin, so they can add all of the pets and so forth. Now, it looks very simple because it is, but it will be able to showcase the power of Django. So this is what you're going to be building by the end of this course with me. I'm very excited. Let's go ahead and get started. So in this mini course, I'm going to show you how to build from ground up a pet adoption web app using Django. So it's going to be a simplified version, but nevertheless, I want to show you how easy it is using Django, the Django web framework, to create fully functioning web applications. So users are going to be able to look at pets. So we're going to see a list of pets where they can go ahead and look at the details about the pets, which will have descriptions, photos, and all the metadata that users need before they make a decision whether they want to adopt a pet or not. Okay. And of course, users then will be able to send a request to adopt a pet that they are interested in adopting. There are many things we're going to be learning about Django as we go through this, and the idea is not to overwhelm you with Django, but it is indeed to invite you, to show you right away how easy it is to create web applications with backend and front end, everything in one go using Django. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm going to be using Visual Studio here. If you don't have Visual Studio, go ahead and install, because it's one of the best editors, code editors, IDEs there. Okay, so next, what you need to do here, I already created a folder where we're going to install, get started with Django. Now, the question may be here, what is this Django thing if you've never heard of it? Well, Django is a web framework that allows developers to build better web apps quickly and with less code. If you go to djangoproject.com, you can right away see what they mean. So Django makes it easier to build better web apps more quickly and with less code. Now, this is very important because you have a lot of different frameworks out there to build applications. Now, the beauty of Django, as you continue to learn, is that it is indeed ridiculously fast. In fact, that's the reason why I'm showing this, right? So Django was designed to help developers take applications from concept to completion as quickly as possible. It's very secure, is exceedingly scalable. So this is beautiful, and you can learn more about Django as well as looking at what big companies in this industry use Django. Pinterest uses Django for their backend and I believe front end, a mix of everything really, as well as Instagram and many other large scale applications out there that you probably use daily. Okay, so Django is a beautiful, wonderful framework that you should definitely look into learning if you've never learned about it. Now, the thing about Django is that Django uses Python. So it's a Python web framework that encourages rapid development and clean, pragmatic design. So I love this part. Built by experienced developers, it takes care of much of the hassle of web development. So you can focus on writing your app without needing to reinvent the wheel. It's free and open source, so that is a really good thing. As of recording this video, Django latest version is this one here, 5.0.4. So depending on when you're watching this could be a little higher, and that's okay. So the basics, the fundamentals that I want to show you about Django here should work regardless of the version of Django, because the infrastructure, the way Django works, should be the same regardless of the version. And also, I will assume that you have Python set up on your machine. If you don't, you can go ahead and check out some of my tutorials and where I show you exactly how to get started with setting up Python and also basics of Python. Assuming you have all of that set up, let's go ahead and what I'll do, let me open the terminal here, and I'm going to go ahead and say something very simple to install Django. But before I even do that, I need to create in my adoption folder directory, I need to set up a virtual environment for us to be able to use this. Okay, it's always customary in Python to create a virtual environment. That way you can put all the dependencies for your project in one place as opposed to in the global namespace. So if you're on Windows, you do pi-m and then the name of the environment, so venv, and then you say venv, and then the name of your environment that you want. So you can say venv as such. Okay, so make sure you do that for Windows. I'm on Mac, so I'm going to say Python. So I'm going to say Python -m venv. That's what I'm going to name. Hit enter, and it's going to go ahead and create. In this case, you see we have our virtual environment set up there with bin include and everything. So once we have our virtual environment, let's go ahead and activate it. So I'm going to say Python 3. So I'm going to say source and the name of my virtual environment, venv as such. I'm going to go bin and activate like this. And voila, you can see that I should have something similar to this to say that everything is activated. Next, in this case, if you're on Windows, of course, you just say the name of your virtual environment. So let's say you also call the venv as such. You say venv / and go to scripts and / again and say activate. So this is going to be for Windows users. All right, the first thing we're going to do is install Django. So I'm going to say Python 3. You can say Python if you're on Windows. Pip install Django like this. Install Django like that. Okay, so this is going to go ahead and install Django, the whole framework inside of our environment variable, inside of our virtual environment. Very good. So it's all installed. And next, we're going to go ahead and start the new Django project. To do so, we just say Django -admin, and then we're going to say start project and the name of the project. In this case, I'm going to call this pet adoption, and make sure to say space and dot to say put everything in this current directory. Hit enter, and you will see that we'll have indeed this pet adoption, which has all of the building blocks for our Python, for our Django project. Okay, so there's a few things here. Don't worry too much. We'll go through what it's necessary. But essentially, we're setting everything up so that our web server, everything is set up for us. But most importantly, we have the settings here. The settings is the core settings for our entire project. So this is where we're building the paths inside the project. We're creating the base directory, and we have secret keys, allowed host, installed apps, which we'll see later. And because of the nature of Django, we have the main project, which we created, and then we're going to create pieces, which are called apps. So these are apps that come with Django: admin, auth, content type, sessions, messages, static files, etc. Okay, don't worry too much about it. We're going to get through most of this stuff. And we have middleware for security, templates, where to find everything related to templates and how to process everything, and so forth. And then we have the URLs. This is where we are going to register URLs that will allow, in this case, our project to know where to go to serve things to the user. And we'll see all of that. This is where we're going to add all of the URLs pertaining to views and everything. So we're going to go through all of this in a minute. And then we have this manage.py. Now, this is the function that is going to be used for us to do certain things, such as administrative tasks using the CLI, using the command line. So essentially, Django comes with this file, manager.py. As you will see, we're going to use that to do all sort of things, such as starting a new app, running migration, and all of that stuff. Okay, so it's going to be very, very useful, as you will see in a bit. Okay, now let's go ahead and create the Django app by saying Python 3, in my case, manage.py, start app adoption, hit enter, and you will see that we'll have the adoption app that was created at the top here. Now, it's a little bit different from the pet adoption as a project, because the adoption, it is indeed an application, which is going to be added into, or is added into, our pet adoption project. There we go. So we were able to use the manage.py to start an adoption app, which is going to be the centerpiece that is added into the main project here. And if you look inside here, it's pretty much the same as the pet adoption project, with a few differences. One is that we have this apps.py, as well as models and test, as well as views. Okay, so we're going to go into that next. Okay, so now we know that we have our project, which we call pet adoption, and it has a few files here that governs the entire project. And then it's customary to create apps inside of projects, which means then we can create as many apps as we want. So this adoption includes everything about our web app. Now, this web app is going to be very simple. You can imagine that in a more complex application, or rather project, you would have something like comments or blogs or accounts. So these are considered in Django as different apps. Now, you don't have to have those apps, as you see here in Django, but it is customary, or it is encouraged, because then you can have different pieces of application that you can plug and play into different other projects that you may have. So it's a really good paradigm for creating web applications, right? So creating these entities, smaller entities. It's just that we take that, in this case an app, and we can include in this pet adoption as part of this product, of this project. Okay, so that is the concept there. So we have our adoption, which has a few files here that we're going to be taking a look at. But before we even do that, we need to understand that the moment we create any application here, if we go back to our project itself, go to settings, you will see that we have this list here called installed apps. And I said earlier that all of these apps here come with Django. So that's the beauty of Django, is that it has all the infrastructure that you need to run fast, really fast, to run creating a web application, a back end and as well as front end. Really fast, because the idea is to get you going. I know I keep saying really fast, but that is the essence of Django. So it comes pre-populated with these apps. So again, it has this concept of apps, which I explained earlier. Okay, just pieces of contained features or functionality that when it come together, you have the entire project. So whenever we create an app, which we did just now, adoption, we need to add it here. So what I like to do usually is to put to add a comment here, say my apps, like that. Call this Django, say default apps. So we kind of know which is which. So in this case here, I'm going to say adoption and comma, because it's a list, to say that I'm registering this adoption app that we added here. It's very important. That way, Django, the whole app, will know that, okay, we need to register this adoption app. It's going to look at this folder as part of this project. In Django, you can create a backend, you can create a database, because that's the whole base, right? You create a web app, you need to save data, okay, somewhere. So that is very simple. And the way things work in Django is that most of the CRUD operations, so create, read, update, and delete, all of that is abstracted out so that we don't have to write any SQL queries ourselves. We do so by using an ORM. An ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. What that means is that we are going to map all of the underlying databases and tables abstracted out. That way we can just use models in forms of class to interact with our database. And that is very crucial, as you will see. It just simplifies everything. Okay, so the first thing we'll need to do, I'm going to go open again our terminal here. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to run migrations. The reason being is because if you go back to our settings here, you can see that we have this admin, auth, content, type, sessions, manage, and message, and so forth. These internally are going to be handled through a database, meaning that we need to create a migration. We need to run a migration so that we have an actual database that we can use, so we can add other things, other tables into our database. And when we run it the first time, our migration, as you will see for now, is going to create the actual infrastructure where we're going to see admin, auth, and all the tables that Django needs to create, of course, in a database. That way everything works. So I'm going to go back to our terminal and I'm going to run the following command. So I'm going to say Python 3 in my case, go through manage.py, right, that file that we talked about. Just say make migrations and hit enter. Okay, so it says here it's nothing detected. The reason being is because, well, it didn't detect anything because those migrations were already created internally, even though we don't see them. So now we can just go ahead and say Python 3 manage.py and just say migrate. So look what's going to happen. Hit enter. Voila, there's a lot of things that happen. We have lots of greens that says okay, and you can see things that have happened. It says here auth.006 require content types. So essentially all of these have these auth appended permissions and all of these different things, content types and all of that. You can see that it's applying, first of all, those content type migration, the auth initial migration, the admin, and so forth. So what's happening here is that we open here, you can see that right away we have this DB SQLite 3, which means it went ahead and created a database, and inside of that database it created all those tables. Now it so happens that I do have an extension called SQL, so I'm going to say Command Shift P in my case here, and I'm going to start typing SQL. So you can actually install the SQLite viewer, SQLite extension, so for you to be able to open a database. So I'm going to click here and it's going to know exactly. I'm going to go ahead and open this SQLite 3, which is this guy here, for my project. So I'm going to open and voila, now I'm able to see at the bottom here the Explorer, which means I can go inside and voila, you can see that we have all of these tables that were created, right? If I open, you can see it has ID, name, and so forth. Now, all of these tables are empty because let's go to the user, for instance. If I click there, it's going to open this. Remember, you have to install the SQLite extension for you to be able to see this. It's very simple. Okay, so you can see that we have here SQL. There's nothing. It's empty, right? Because we haven't added anything for users. All right. Very good. Just keep that in mind. Now I'm going to get rid of that. So now we've set up everything. We have the backbone of our project, our Django project set up, especially in the back end. We have a database, which we also ran migrations to create the tables as I've showed you. But now we need to create our own database. Rather, we need to create our own tables that need to be included. To do so, let's go to our adoption. This is our app. Okay, that's the distinction. I'm going to go to models. You'll see how easy this is. So the main idea behind here is that I want to create a simple application web app that allows users to come in and look at pets they might want to adopt. In this case, I will have to have a model, which is going to be transformed into a table that will represent, in this case, a pet. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say class, right? I'm going to represent a model here in terms of class, which is going to be mapped using the ORM into an actual table. Look how beautiful this is. So I'm going to say class, call this pet, and I'm going to pass, in this case, say models and model like that. So what I'm saying here is that, well, this class pet here is not just any lingering class that I've just created. Well, it's going to extend the model. This comes from Django. So it's going to create a model class, which then is going to be connected to an actual table in the backend. All right, very good. So for each pet, we have properties, we have fields. In this case, the first field is going to be a name. Now I'm going to set up here what type of this field is going to be. What type is this going to be? Well, the idea here is that we need to mimic a form, we need to mimic a model that Django understands. And Django already comes with field types that we can attach these fields or these attributes into. So look at how easy this is. So I'm going to say models and I'm going to say char field. So you can see if I say dot, there's text field, char field, there's foreign key, and all of these different out of field and so forth, right? In this case, I just want a char field to say just a field of characters that users can add information into. Now I'm going to pass here a max length. This is very important because we don't want to be attacked by malicious software out there that will end up overloading our field, right? So we can say the math length is going to be 100 for the name field for a pet. I'm going to also add description. I'm going to say the same thing, models, and I'm going to just say this is going to be a text field. You will see later how all this mapping happens to a form as well as into an actual model, which is a table in our database. Okay, next I'm going to add here is going to be photo, which is going to be a photo for this pet, and I'm going to use models again. And it has this called the field called image field, which allows us to pass an image. And in this case, I have to pass upload to, which in this case, I'm just going to say it's going to be pets / that's going to be a folder where all this is going to be uploaded to, and this can be null. I'm going to say true as well as blank. So I'm not going to make a big deal if this field is null, if there is no image for this pet. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to override the str method. So this str method here, every class has this str method, which essentially describes what this pet is going to look like when we call, for instance, pet, right? So it's just going to go ahead and return a name. Very good. So let's go ahead and save that. Okay, now that we have this set up, okay, we need to run migrations again. Now this time the migration, we need to create the migration first because we added our own custom model. Now this is important, as you will see, because then this will allow in the backend to be transformed into an actual table, as you will see here. Now you can see right now that I have no anything related to pet here, none, because I haven't run the migration to say, okay, go ahead and create the infrastructure and the table and everything. And all of that is easy to do because I can go back, open our terminal and clear this. I'm going to run this command to make migrations first. So I'm going to say Python 3 manage.py. I'm going to say make migrations. Okay, and usually you want to give the name of the app. So the name of the app is going to be adoption, but if you just run like this, it should work too. But I always like to add the name because you may have many different apps. So okay, I'm going to call this adoption. Hit enter. Okay, looks like we cannot use image because Pillow is not installed. This is good. It's saying here, can't do that because if we go back to our models, clear this, we are passing this image field. Now the image field requires for us to pass an image later. Well, for that to work, we need to have a library called Pillow. So Pillow is one of the most popular package in Django that allows you to deal with images. And so we need to install that. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, really easy, and paste there. Say Python and pip install Pillow. Hit enter. Now it's going to install Pillow for us in our virtual environment, which will allow us to then go back and run this manage make migration adoption again. Okay, enter, and look what's going to happen. Voila, look what happens. So if you go back here, you'll see under adoptions, you'll see a new file folder called migration. Open that, and you can see that we have this 0001 initial migration. If you click on that, you'll see what happens. It's just a simple Django class with a few things. One of the things you need to notice here is that there's this operations here. This operations is calling these migrations that create models. So this is actually going to be run in a second here, which is going to allow us to create a model. We're going to give a name. It's going to be pet, and the fields that are going to be attached to this model. Look at that. So we have fields ID. This we didn't add in our models. If you look at here, we don't have ID, but that is added automatically because each table has to have the column ID, right? Very good. So that is automatically created. Very good. Primary key, it's true, and so forth. And then we have name, description, and photo, which are exactly what we added here in our model. Okay, so this is the file that's going to be run in a second here to go ahead and create the actual model. The model is, in this case, what we're talking about here internally. It's going to create a table. Let's go ahead and do that. So open again. Now that we have this migration, we need to run this migration, right? This file here, which I explained to you, has the code to go and create that model. So what do we do? Yes, Python 3 manage.py, and I just say migrate this time because I've created the migration. The file is there, and I'm going to run it to create the migration. So hit enter, and look at that. It goes ahead and says operation to perform, apply all migrations, admin, adoption. Adoption is added now. And so what happens is that every time we run migration, it looks at other migrations that were made, and it looks through those folders to see if there's anything that have changed in those files. Well, for admin, auth, and everything else, nothing has changed, but you can see now we have adoption. And went ahead and ran that adoption.0001 initial. Now look what's happening now. If I go back here and open our SQLite Explorer, conveniently, you will see that we are now having something else. I'm going to go ahead and refresh. Voila. You can see that we have this adoption table. If I open, I know it's a table. Open, there's ID, there's name, description, and photo fields. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we didn't have to go and write SQL commands to create the actual table. All of that we're able to do using models. So we created our pet model. We need yet another model here, which is going to be called interest. This will allow us to, or at least the backend, to save some information about people who may be interested in applying to adopt a pet. Okay, will make sense as we keep going. So I'm going to create a new model here. Say class, starts all as a class because it is indeed a Python class. I'm going to call this interest and do the same thing. Inherits from models, model, and so we want to add a field called email, and I'm going to say models dot and get a field. I'm going to say email field. Look at that. It even has an email field for us. And then I'm going to add a date submitted. So date submitted. And this is going to be models.date. Look at that. Date time field. And what I want to happen is I want this to be something that is added automatically. So I'm going to say auto underscore now add to true. So this is going to be something that the moment that users add something to that field and they send, it's going to be created. The date and timestamp is going to be generated automatically. Now I have to think about something here. The idea here is that when a person comes in and they want a pet, or they're interested in applying to adopt a pet, well, they need to have a way to register the pet that they want to adopt. Meaning the interest class here, model, has to have some relation to the pet, which means each time a person shows interest, well, they have to show interest to what? To a certain pet or certain pets. Could be one or more. So in this case here, I'm going to say pet, create that field that is going to attach or create a relationship to the pet that they are interested in. So I'm going to say models dot use the foreign keyword function that is, and then I'm going to pass the model that I want to be related to. So I'm going to say pet, okay, and then I'm going to pass something else here. Here is on delete. I'm going to say models dot cascade as such, all to say that if you delete this interest, if somebody deletes their application, we're going to delete that everything related to that pet that is related to this person that is interested. Okay, and I'm going to pass this related name here for easy access called interests. That way, at any point in time, we can just say interest or pet.interests, and it's going to show all the interests from that user or for that person or from that person. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to override the str method such, and let's just return something better by saying an f string here, self.email interested in the pet. So self.pet.name. Okay, this is what is going to show when we just look up the interest object. Okay, again, remember, anytime that we create a model, we need to go and create a migration and run the migration file. So the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and just say make migrations again. Okay, you can see 002 interest.py was created, and it's very interesting because it always appends the actual item class model that was added. Very handy. So now we're going to do the same thing, just run those migrations, or run the migration, and run those migration or the migration file. So enter, and you can see, voila, adoption. It went ahead and applied the interest. And if you go back here and look, refresh, you can see that we have adoption interest and adoption pet. Okay, very good. So we have those tables there for us. And if we go back to our migrations, you can see we have the initial migration and we have the number 2, which is the interest that we created. Okay, very good. So now we have our models set up, which are very, very important. So I'm going to save this, and there you have it. Now, I went through all of this and I did things backwards, right? Because you can say, okay, Paulo, we haven't even seen anything in the browser. We don't know if this works and so forth. And you're right. So what we're going to do now, we're going to stem away a little bit from all this code and see if we can run our server so you can see this web app working. All right. So what I like to do is I like to open another terminal here by clicking that plus button. Okay. So now I have two. I have this one that I can come and run my commands, and this one's going to be to run the server. So all I have to do is say Python 3 manage.py again and say run server. So this is the command you use to run Django, to run the server, so it serves somewhere where you can see the app working. And you should be able to see this starting development server at HTTP. This is localhost port 8000. So now you can just command click, and that should open this on the browser. Just talks about Django and nothing really much. So this is what is served on port 8000. So this tells us, of course, that our Django app is working, and a few things you will see here. So I like to leave that running and go back to here this is where we're going to be running other commands. But luckily everything is working, and that's good. Okay, we'll get back to that. So make sure this is working. It should be working. That's very good. So now, next thing we need to do is, with Django, we have the admin. So the admin is, of course, the settings that allows us to, number one, go in the back end so we can see the entire UI user interface that allows us to interact with the models and do all sort of things pertaining to this web app. Okay, so for us to be able to see the admin, it's very simple. All you do, you come here and say / and say admin like this. Okay, now this is going to happen. It's going to say, okay, go ahead and log in. Well, how do we log in? I don't know what to do here. I don't have a username and so forth. Well, Django allows us to create an admin so we can log in here, right? And you will see. So remember, this is going to be the interface that allows the admin, the administration, to do certain tasks. You will see you can delete things, add things, and do all sorts of things. But we need to create the actual user who is the admin to be able to log in here and see everything. Now remember, this is the admin. It's not what normal users are going to be able to see. So let's go back to our code and open our terminal. So here I'm going to have to write this command to create an admin. I'm going to say Python 3, again, manage.py, and say create super user like that. So manage.py, create super user, all lowercase, one word. Hit enter. So if you leave it blank, it's going to use the name as the default name that shows here. For me, it shows Pidishon because that is my computer name and so forth. So for you, it could be something else. So in this case, I'm just going to say admin, hit enter, and then it prompts here for you to add an email. In production, of course, you should add an email, but in this case, I'm just going to not add an email by saying enter. A password. Now you need to pass a password here, and it has to be something that is at least 4 to 5 digits. Okay, in production, of course, you need to add something more elaborate, but with testing, just pass whatever comes to mind. Make sure that at least is 4 to 5 characters, I believe. I've typed things in here, but it's not going to show anything for security reasons. So hit enter, and you need to pass it again, the same password. Voila. Now the super user was created, admin. So if you come back here, I'm going to use my admin, and I'm going to pass the password that I added. If I say log in, I should be able to log in, and voila, you can see I'm now logged in the back end. This is beautiful because there's so many things that are happening here. First of all, you can see that we have groups. This is under authentication and authorization. This is all given, so we can actually create groups, we can create users, and so forth. If I click on users, you will see that there is indeed one user that was created, and he is the admin. So any user we end up creating, depending on the application, they will be shown here. But the beauty also about having this user interface, this admin backend here, is that we can do all sort of things from here. You can change password, you can log out, and so forth. But most important, you can see here, if I click here, it's going to take me to the index, the main page of our application, which for now has this default install, worked successfully. We're going to change that later. All right, so I'm going to go back and so forth. So now we have this admin that we can use to go back here. Now, I said that the beauty of the admin panel, the Django administration panel here, is that it allows us to do all sort of things. We can add users, add groups, and many other things. But most importantly, we can also add a way for us to see our models, in this case, our data, as well as the tables and everything. For this to work, all I have to do, we're going to go back to our code. Okay, let's close that down. And what I will do here, let's go to open our Explorer, and I'm going to go to the admin. Now, this is under adoption, which is our app. So here is where we register our models to say, okay, I want that to be added in the backend here. Well, how do we do that? Well, you just say admin.site.register, and you pass the model you want to register. So I have 2 models I want to register. Let's start with recipe. As such, now you can see that it's going to have, let's start with pet model. Now we have an issue here because it's going to say, well, I am under this different file. I don't know what pet is. That means we have to import pet. So 2 ways. You can say command period and it's going to say add from adoptions models import. So I'm going to click, and voila, it's going to go ahead to adoptions, go to models, and import pet. So essentially, it's going here, adoptions, and go to models and get pet. I could have also said from dot space models import pet. That also works. Either way works. This says this dot here says go to this current directory, go to models, file, and get pet. Okay. And now if I save this, look what happens. If I come here, you can see there's nothing pertaining to pets. If I refresh, you can see that now I have pets. If I click, you can see that I can even add a pet from here. Very, very cool. If I click here, you look at this, what's happening. Now I can add a name. So these are all of the fields that we added for our pet. Name, description, and even photo. Very good. So let's see if I want to add, in this case, the interest model. I do the same thing, admin, that site, register, interest, and it is under the same model. So I'm just going to say comma, interest as such, and save that. Come here and refresh. You can see that I even have interest as well. Click here. I can go ahead and add an interest, just one. We need to add a pet because that is the relationship I said. Any person that is going to add or send an email to say they're interested, they have to attach a pet, which makes sense. Now, this is empty. Why? Because we don't have any pets in our pets table. Very good. So there we go. You can see now very, very quickly we're able to create earlier two models, pet and interest. And now we create a super user for the admin. That way we can go in the back end, the admin that all comes with Django. We didn't do anything. This comes with Django. Here is where us as the admin are able to add pets to all sort of things that we want. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a few pets. I'm going to click on pets and say add. And so the first one I'm going to add here, let's say the name is going to be Bunny. Okay, name, I'm going to say Clover. Let's say Clover. And I already have description, so I won't bore you from me writing everything. I'm just going to paste it all in there. So Clover is charming and playful 2-year-old Holland Lop rabbit, and blah, blah, blah. Very good. And I can add an image. I'm going to click here, this beautiful image of a bunny. And I'm going to say save and add another one. Let's continue. And next is going to be Gizmo. Gizmo, actually, let's see. Gizmo is a hamster. Gizmo is a hamster. So Gizmo is a curious and energetic Syrian hamster. Very good. Let's add there. There is. Save another one. So this is all in the back end that we're adding these pets to the database. Okay, let's continue. Whiskers, the description. Whiskers is a playful and affectionate 3-month-old baby kitten. Very cute. Let's go ahead and get the kitten. Oh my goodness. Yes. Okay, let's add another one. And you should have access to all of these files and everything anyway. Okay, so Echo is going to be Mr. Parrot. And one more. We have to have a puppy. And we add a description as such. Bailey is an adorable 6-month-old Labrador Retriever. Okay, let's go ahead and get the puppy. Oh, yes. And I'm going to go ahead and save. There we go. So now you can see we have all of these. Okay. And I can open that and close that. You can see we have all the puppies. If I say click there, it has the actual URL. If for the pets, we have at least 5 pets. Now I'm going to show you that we have added those into a database. If you don't believe me, this is actually being fed from database, but I can also show you. Go back and open our SQLite database here. I'm going to refresh real quick. Pet here. It should have name, description, photo. Look what's going to happen. We'll go ahead and click here to see the table. And just as you would expect, we have all of them here. Clover, Gizmo, Whiskers, Echo, and Bailey. So they were all added, and as well as descriptions, Let's see what else. And photo. It has where we have our pets, bunny, and so forth, hamster, and all of that. So we have a table containing the information, which is exactly what you see here. So far, if I go to this site by clicking there or going endpoint here, this is all we see. But that's not really what we want to see. We want to see something different than this, that pertains to our project, to our web app. How do we do that? Well, if we go back to our code here in Django, so we talked about models, right? The central piece of any application in Django and in general is the model, which means in this case we have database, which in this case we have an actual table that serves something. The question is, how do I then show something here when I go to this URL? When I go to this path here, how do I show something different than just this? Right? But this is not very useful to us. How do we do that? So Django divides everything into essentially 3 categories. So we have models, this is database. We have views, this is where the logic of getting things from database, creating certain calculations if we need to be, and then pass those into what we call templates. So the templates is what is going to be shown here. So essentially, think of a template just an HTML with some Django markup language per se, which we'll talk about in a second here. So that is the idea. So now we have the models, database set up. Now we need to create the view. Now, the thing about Django is that when you say view, a view is what users view, usually when we talk about a view. But in Django, a view is actually different. A view is more like a controller. It's just a place where we can actually create the logic, which is going to then be sent to the actual view, which in this case is just a template in Django, what users can actually see. So where is that written? Where is that put together for us to be able to see something that we can see here? Well, all of that is inside of a view. So let's go ahead and close this down real quick and open our folder here, still under adoption because this is our app. We're going to go to views folder or file. So there we go. We have a view here. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say define a function. There's different ways to define a view. There's class base and there's function base. I'm going to use the functions for simplification. So I'm going to say index. You can name whatever you want. I'm going to say index, and we need to pass what we call the request object here, because the request allows us to do many other things on our page. So that needs to be passed always. And there we go. There is indeed our function. In this case, it's a view. So this is where we return something that we can show in the browser here. So in this case here, I'm going to do is I'm going to say return. I'm going to use just a simple HTTP request object, and I'm going to just pass hello pet lovers, like that. Now HTTP request is an object. We need to go ahead and install that. So command period, and we're going to install that from Django HTTP. I'm going to import the HTTP request. So click, and there we go. So this was imported. So the HTTP request, if you hover over, is a basic HTTP request. All right. Very good. Now you can see, well, that's great. Let's save that and refresh. And you see nothing really is happening. What's going on? Well, there are a few things that we need to do for this to work. First of all, we need to wire our project to know where to serve this and how to get this so we can serve it here. The first thing we need to do actually is in our adoption, we need to create another file called URLs. So I'm going to click here, make sure under adoption, click this button and say urls.py. Now it has to be exactly the same, urls.py. So this is the place where we're going to add the URLs, which are going to be mapped so that we are able to then pass that and show something here. What do we need to add in this URL file? Well, this URL file, we need to add a few things. First of all, I like to always add what we call the app name. So say app_name. And I'm going to call this adoption. The reason why I want to do this is because I want to give some sort of a namespace, as we'll see, that will always know if I say adoption anywhere, it's going to know this is the app name, which is adoption app. Because remember, in Django, a project may have many different apps. So you want to prefix, in a sense, to have a namespace for each application you create. The next thing we need to do here is pass what we call the URL patterns, which is just a list of paths that we're going to pass here to say, okay, whenever the endpoint like this is hit, we're going to forward that to X, Y, and Z and show whatever needs to be shown. The first thing I'm going to add here, I'm going to say the path. So this is the function that we need to pass. I'm going to go ahead and command period. Are not helpful, so I'm actually going to do that manually. So I'm going to say from Django.urls, I'm going to say import path. So if you hover over, the path function returns a URL pattern. And you will see what that means. So essentially, URL pattern, what it means is that it's going to give us a route that will allow us to say, okay, at route, for instance, /me, we're going to we are going to show a template X, Y, and Z that says X, Y, and Z, and so forth. That's all we're doing here. We're creating the route. We're creating the route through the path. So for the path, we need to pass a few things. The first thing here I'm going to pass, I'm going to just put an empty. This is the first route. What I'm saying here, if you hover over, says the first thing is the route. If I pass an empty string like that, that means I want to go to the route like this, which means it's what you see here. Okay. But now I want to point to whatever I add in my view here. I want it to point to this index. That way it shows something, hopefully, like this. Well, to do that, we continue. We're going to say that is empty at the root. And then here I'm going to pass the actual view that I want to pull in to show. So I'm going to say view. In this case, it's going to be view is equal. Actually, I can say just views like this. And then I'm going to say index. Now, this is important. First of all, we need to go ahead and command period, import views from Django views, or I can just import views like this. So I can say import all the views from adoptions app. That's okay. So now we're saying here, now in fact, if I say command and click, look what's going to happen. Click, voila, it takes us to the view that we just created. So we're pointing to say, whenever we get to this URL path here, which is just the route, which in this case is going to be 18,000 and nothing in front, we want to show whatever is inside of this view. So this is going to return this HTTP request that says hello pet lovers. And the next thing you want to add, it's very important, I'm going to add the actual name. This is important. Why? Because you will see in a second later that this is actually what you need to do. For now, I'm just going to say, okay, just keep in mind of that. We'll talk about it later. And there you go, we have that. Now, we're not done yet. The reason being is because, okay, we have added these URLs at the app level, which is the adoption. But remember, the app is just a little piece in the grand scheme of things, which means it has to be part of our adoption. Which means now, if I'm going to close that, I'm going to go to the pet adoption. Remember, this is the project. This is a very important distinction in Django. App adoption. This is the application and app, and this is the project. So now when we go to the pet adoption, we need to register that URL or all of the URLs inside of adoption, so that the app itself, in conjunction with Django, it will know where to direct everything. So think of this adoption, pet adoption, the application, the core, as the traffic manager, essentially, that says, okay, you have to go X, Y, and Z. Whenever I receive this command, I can direct these people to this area, to that area, to X, Y, and Z, and so forth. That means then I have to go to URLs of the project here. Scroll down, you can see, voila, we have path, admin, and admin side URLs. Now let's study this for a second. What is this happening? Well, if I go back here, remember before, I'm going to go to this previous one, same thing, it's just different one. You notice if I go to 8,000, of course, we're going to see this, which is essentially, it's the same thing. I'm just showing you something here. Remember when I said that you said / you say admin, where do you go? Voila, you go to admin because I'm logged in and shows admin. Now, do you see what's happening here? It says / admin /. Here says admin /, and then we're serving the site URLs. What this means is that I'm telling the whole project, right? If anybody goes to this admin endpoint, this admin route, Then I'm going to serve all of the site URLs pertaining to admin. In this case, Django knows to go and open this admin site. If you're not logged in, you have to log in as you saw before. But importantly here, this is where I'm registering all of the URLs pertaining for admin. So that means I have to do the same thing, say path, and I need to register the URLs pertaining to what? Well, to the pet adoption app. Because admin internally is seen as an app in Django. You remember Command P to search. I'm going to go to settings. This is beautiful. You remember I said if you come all the way down, installed apps, we pass admin or adoption. That's ours. But look at this. Aha. That means that admin is also an app. Therefore, we have admin, that site, that URLs. So that way we are indeed registering all of the URLs pertaining to the admin app, which means I have to do the same thing for my adoption app. So I'm just going to put empty URL or empty route there, and then I'm going to say include in this case, right? Because I am not part of Django. This is just a different app, so I'm going to have to say include, which means I need to say command period, get this Django URLs import include. That's very important. And then I'm going to just say I'm going to include adoptions or adoption.urls as such. It's different than this because this comes from Django, remember, because it's coming from contrib admin. This is Django. Us, in this case here, I'm going to say adoption.urls is going to be the URLs from our adoption app. These URLs here. That's all I'm saying here. Register all of that so that whenever somebody comes in, now they go to this empty route, which in this case is going to be route, right? I want to include all of the URL from adoptions, and then Django is going to say, okay, adoption.url, so all URLs of adoption, again, this URLs here for not that one, actually, this one, adoption app, I'm going to click, and it's going to say, oh, you said that you want to go to this route here, which is empty. If that's the case, then I'm going to just route you to where? Well, I'm going to actually send you to view index, command, click this one, and I'm going to serve whatever it's in here for you to see. That's all what's happening here. With that said, now look what's going to happen. Look, before we had this, if I come here and refresh, we having some issues. Let's come around here. Every time you make all those changes, what you need to do is Control C to kill the server and run again. So arrow up or type manage.py, run server Python like this. Okay, so now it's running again. If I come here, look at what's going to happen. I'm going to refresh and we're going to have some issues. Take one positional argument, but two were given. This is an error that I made for our index, but this is good. So we can see what happens when it doesn't work. You can see it says raised during adoption.views.index. So we got some issue here. So I'm going to solve that. And the problem here is that this should be HTTP response, not request. So my bad. It's okay. Response. And actually let's go ahead and import the response. So let's remove that request because that is not what we want. All right, my bad. So make sure it's HTTP response. And then you pass whatever you need to pass here. So I'm going to save this. And if I come here and refresh right now, you can see, hello, pet lovers. Nice. So we're able to actually pass in our own response to our view here, to our website. So now, this may not seem much, but we are able to run our own app, our own project without the boilerplate code. We are directing everything ourselves by returning what we need to return. The thing that you need to keep in mind here, I'm going to close all of these so that we don't bug down also, so that we don't get confused. Important thing to keep in mind is here, we need to pass the path. Okay, the path is just URL path that we pass, and in this case, the path we need to pass the route. Now, the cool thing here, if I change the route here to say me, you always have to end it with /. If I save now, look what's going to happen. Just that one saving, if I refresh, this is going to happen. Because now it's going to say, well, I can't find this path. Because now it's going to say, well, the way you put things together, I don't know what to serve when I go to this URL. However, if I go to /me, look what's going to happen. Now I can see hello pet lovers. So it's very important what you pass. Remember, this is under adoption URLs.py. It's important what you pass here, because that will determine how to access your page. So I'm going to just leave it as that. And there you have it. So now if I go back and just go to 8,000 pet lovers, it's showing. Okay, so what we've learned here. First of all, we had to go and add this, created a view first. So we go to views, we created this view, which essentially is just the logic that we put together to pass, in this case, to what user is going to be, what user are going to be able to see. We'll see later that we're going to create an actual HTML and do all sort of that, but this is the beginning. But once we've created a view, we need to add the URLs. The URL is going to say, okay, what is the path and what are we going to be serving there? That is the thing that you have to think about, okay? So patterns, URL patterns, that is, it's a list. We pass the path method. We pass the actual URL. In this case is the route. So make sure, as I said, you have to make sure that you know which route you want users to go to. In this case, I just want the direct route here. So no / it's just the index, the main, to show whatever, to serve our index view. And I pass name here, which later you'll see what it will do. And once you have that done, you should be good. But if this is the first time, remember, you have to go to make sure you register the URLs from our adoption app into the project. That's why we go to URLs here and we set up the adoption URLs. Okay. Now here also, if I change the path here or the route, if I say again, pets, for instance, always finish with /. If I save that and come here and refresh, you're going to see the same problem. That means I have to go to / pets to be able to get to where I want to do, to where I want to get, to where I want to be. Okay, so that's very important, whatever you pass as well here. Okay, which was here, I mean. So I'm going to just remove this, go back what we had, and now go back here, enter, you can see it's still working. So at this point, we learn about the basics of Django structure through the files. So we learn about views.py, which focus on creating the views, as in this case, they're not the views in a way of the things that we see, rather they're kind of like controllers, okay? And we learned that URLs.py is very important because this is where we create the routes and everything. And we learn about models, which is where we add the classes which are transformed into models, which are fed through the ORM ecosystem to deal with databases as well as tables and so forth. The settings.py, this is the settings for the entire project where we have to add the actual URLs for each app that we add, and so forth, and so forth. So building web apps with Django include, as I've mentioned, defining the URLs, writing the actual views. Remember, the views here are not the views as you would think in any other framework. This is just where we write the actual logic. And of course, we're going to look at writing templates. So this is a mixture of HTML as well as Django template language, right? Which I will show you in a second here. So the Django architecture is a little bit different in that it uses the MVT, which stands for Model View Template. So this comes actually from the model view controller, which a little bit with a little bit of modifications. So we have the models, we have the view, and we have the template. So the model, as we spoke about, is all about data structure. So this is where we define the schema, the ORM, database abstraction layer, and all of that. Okay, so it is database driven. The view, this is where indeed we create the business logic. This is where we handle the requests and so forth. And then we have the template, which this is the presentation layer, which in conjunction with the view, we are able to lay out the structure of what we want the users to see. The beauty here is that we are separating, the beauty here is that we're using what we call the separation of concerns, meaning that all of these components are not tightly coupled, which means they are their own entity that work together. And this is what you need in a system in a project that you're building. And Django reinforces that. Now let's look into the model view template as pertains to the Django architecture. So the idea is very simple, that in the front end, we have the user who wants to, for instance, get to see something on the web page. So at the middle of everything, we have the view. As we said, the view is the controller that has the logic that says, okay, I'm going to return X, Y, and Z for the users to see. But before that, in the backend, we have the model, database tables, and the template, which we'll talk about. So template essentially is just the actual HTML and what Django is going to show on the web browser, okay? And so that is the relationship that we have here. But most importantly, there's this system, there's mechanism called URL dispatcher. What this URL dispatcher does is, as the name implies, dispatches all of the URLs, all of the paths to show what needs to be shown. So if a user goes to localhost 8000/admin, the URL dispatcher is going to go through all of the URLs that are known to it in the form of settings, and then it will be able to pass along the actual view that needs to take care of that to show to the user. And so this is an overview of the MVT model view template architecture and how things work in Django. So far, what we see here is hello pet lovers. So we have the admin. Of course, when we go to the index, the main here, we can see hello pet lovers, because that is what we instructed in our views to show. Now, this works fine, but that's not what we want. We want to actually pass a template, which means an HTML-based file that will serve something to show in our browser here. And so what we'll need to do here is to pass a template. For that, we have to change a few things. So for our index here, what I will do, so first of all, we are going to go, let me go ahead and delete or get rid of some of these. And I'm going to go to our app. Inside of our app here, make sure it is clicked, right? We're going to create a new folder or directory called templates. Make sure it's exactly like this, templates. And it's customary in Django to actually probe in templates, create another folder called adoption, which essentially is going to be the same name as the app. I don't know why, but this is how they recommend. So templates, adoption, which means here, this is where we add all the templates for the adoption app. So inside of adoption directory here, I'm going to right click and I'm going to say, start with the index.html as such. Now, in my case here, you can see that I have this. So this is because I have this DJ lint that is installed. It's just telling me that I need to install it for this to run. So pip install like this. Now, in your case here, I'm going to show you in a second. I'm going to just copy this and open a browser or a terminal. And I'm going to go ahead and pip install that in my environment. So what happens here is that you can see that something has changed a little bit. So we have index.html now, and you have DG for Django. You can see also at the bottom here, I have an option. I can select a language. So if I click, I can go ahead and say HTML. You can see I can go toggle between HTML, just vanilla HTML, or I can go and select the HTML, which is going to be the Django HTML. The reason why you want the Django HTML is because it's easier for us to do, to use the Django template language for us to show things on the browser. We'll get there. So here's the thing that I want you to do. Okay, so let's go to extensions. And what I want you to do is to go and find DJ lint like this, or DJ HTML, or DJ lint, as you see here. Go ahead and install this extension here. So if you scroll up, it says exactly what you need to do. Installation, just copy that and run it. So this essentially is going to help us with HTML template formatting for our Django, for when we write Django templates and so forth. And the other one you need is the Django extension, this one by Baptiste Dartenay, I think that's his name. This just gives us this beautiful syntax and scoped for Django. So you can see here, it's pretty small. It's going to help us a lot, especially if you're going to continue writing Django applications and so forth. So go ahead and install those and you should be good. Okay, so in our index.html, what is that I want to show? First of all, I'm going to change this to HTML, just pure HTML, because then I can go and say command 1 to have this exclamation mark and hit enter. And this will give me, of course, a bare bones HTML file with everything, okay? So in this case, I'm going to just say pets or adoption for the title of this page, okay? And there you have it. So in our body here, what I will do, I'm going to put a p tag, so I'm going to say p like that. Check out all of our pets, something like that. So now I have, of course, this index.html, which is under our templates adoption there. So I'm going to get rid of that for now. In our views here, I want to render that HTML. So what do we do? So it's very simple. I'm going to just say return. Actually, let me just go ahead and get rid of all of this that I no longer need. So we're going to return a render function. And the render function is always there. It was added right away, right? Django shortcuts, import render. So if you hover over the render, we pass in a request there, and we can pass the template. Actually, we must pass the template name, which essentially is just a string. It just tells us where to find that template. The template in this case we're talking about is this index.html. Okay, so let's go ahead and say and do that. So first of all, I'm going to go and pass request, which is this object that has been passed there. And then I'm going to pass the string, which is going to tell us where to find that template. So this template is under adoption and called index.html, just like this. Let's save that. So what happened here is that anytime we hit this index, which essentially is here, I haven't refreshed yet, we should be able to say render, passing request object, and then say, okay, I want you to render this index.html, which is exactly what we created here. Now, I don't need to go to templates. I just say adoption because internally Django will know that is templates and get adoption, go to index.html. So save this. And right now, if I refresh this, you can see, check out all of our pets. So this is working. That means then that indeed we are looking or we are serving this index page, index.html as our template. So this is just pure HTML. Now the question is, okay, how do I then, for instance, get some object or something that I can pass along from our view here, that I can pass through metadata, some objects, and then show them here, because that's the whole point. We want this to be dynamic. Well, if we go to our views here, we can actually do the following. Imagine that I have this data object, or in this case, a dictionary. I'm going to say something like, okay, name. I'm going to say it's Rico, like this. Okay, so it's just a dictionary. I can actually pass this along with my render method along through our index.html, so that then in our index.html we were able to pick that up and show it here. Look how simple this is. So now the other thing I can pass along in our render method, if I hover over, you can see it says here context. Context is just some metadata that comes in as a mapping or a dictionary. String any, string keys, and value could be anything. That's all really could be something like this, right? So now I can say here, actually I can go ahead and say context is equal to, it has to be something like this, and I can say data, and the value is going to be data. Now I can say this, just let's say names for now, and data. So I'm saying here the context is going to include a key, which is names, which is going to be this name Rico, which is a dictionary. And so now I can pass that along like this, context, like that. Now, when we go to index.html here, we need to figure out a way to perhaps get the contents of our data, which is being passed as a context, and we're passing it along like that. How do we do that? Well, this is when we use the Django template language, DTL. Okay? So the beauty of Django is that Django has its own Django template engine that allows us to create certain pieces, that allows us to pass along certain metadata through our index, through an index file, through an HTML file, so that we can dynamically retrieve, retrieve data from our templates coming from our views. So Django DTL, Django template language, has a few things that we can use. It has variables, and to create a variable inside of an HTML template, which in this case becomes a Django template, which in this case we just call it template. We use those double curly braces as such, and then inside we put the variable name. I will show you in a second. And then we have tags. So these tags here means inside there we can pass some code that is part of the DTL Django template language, like if statements, for loops, and so forth. And then we have filters as well that allows us to filter or to change a few variables into something else. And we'll see that at some point, hopefully. Okay. So these are the main these are the main components of the Django template language. There are many out there, but that's not the point. I just want to show you the basics here. Okay, so how do we get that to work? So we are passing here this context, which of course we have data, and inside of it have name, Rico. Okay, so we are passing it through our index.html, so we need to look to see if we can get that information here. So the first thing I'm going to do here, if I remove all of that, and of course remember we can put double curly braces like this, and then if I go back here, it's very important that I say exactly the name of the variables. So in this case here, I have the key, I should say, is names, because this is what's being added along through a context. So if I say names, I should get the values, which is this dictionary. Is that true? Let's see. I paste that, just names like this. If I save, and if I refresh, I should get, indeed, this dictionary that says name Rico. Very good. Now the beauty here, because this is a dictionary, and the way things are in Django, this is actually an object. This is a Python object, which means I can say names.name, which means I'm getting the actual field name, because when I say names, I'm getting this data, which is this here. So I can go probe in and get name, which I should get Rico. If I refresh, and voila, I have Rico. Very good. Just like that, we're able to pass metadata, pieces of data, through our render method, which of course we're passing here our template. And Django takes care of everything. So anytime we want to pass information that we want to pass along to be displayed dynamically in our HTML, we just, one way is to add it like this variable. So double quote, so double curly braces, and then Django will know, the Django template engine will know to say, to decipher this names, that name. It's going to know that I'm talking about this names from context, because that is what's being passed. And if I say .name, I'm going to go ahead and get the data and get the value Rico. Very good. And of course, we don't want to pass this data. We want to pass something that actually makes sense. Meaning, we want to pass a object, in this case, all of the pets. Go back here. If I go to my site admin, I know that I have pets that I've added. So I have Bailey, Echo, Whiskers, Gizmo, and Clover. So I want to show them here as a list. How do I do that? Now keep in mind that all of this, you have to remember, all of these are what? Are pets, which are indeed from pet object or pet model. Look how cool Django is. To get all of those pets, to peruse, to go through the database and go to the pet table and get everything from there, look how simple this is. All I have to do is to say pets and set that. All I have to do is say pet as the model, and I'm going to say command period, And I'm going to import that from adoptions.models. Click that, and you can see we have our pet model. Very cool. And all I have to do, say pet.objects, right? So I'm going to get all the objects dot all. That's it. So now if I hover over, this is going to, so now this object here is going to have, so now I have access to all of the pets, and I'm going to put that inside of a variable called pets. And what I can do now, again, I'm going to just put that inside of a context dictionary because that's the way you should do. And I just say pets, and I'm going to pass pets like this. So now the context, which I'm still passing, should have all of the pets coming from the pet model. And because of the abstraction of everything, I can just say pet model.objects. This goes to the database and gets all of the pets that it can find on the database. Save this, and I go to HTML. Now this is not going to work, so I'm just going to go ahead and change this because I've changed the names here. Now it's pets. That is the key to get the pets, which is all of objects, pet object. So let's see what happens if I say pets. Save that. Come here and refresh, and look at this. We get this thing called query set, and we have all this stuff. What does that mean? Well, it means that whenever we have this, say pet.object.all, what we're doing really, we're getting a query set object, which indeed is just a list which has pet objects. So pet object Clover, pet object Gizmo, pet object Whisker, and so forth. Okay? So that's not what we want. Obviously, we want to be able to loop through this query set object just to get the actual names. Ah, look how simple this is. Now, it's all a matter of going back to index, and instead of having the variable here, I'm going to put, indeed, a for loop. So that means I need to put some filter, okay, tags here. So all I have to do, if I say for and hit enter, now remember, I'm able to do this because I have the Django extension added for me. So if I do that, I'm able to get started by doing a for loop like this. So now I'm going to say for what? Well, remember, this is going to be for pet tab, and then in pets, remember, this is very important. Pets has to be exactly the same name as the key of our context dictionary. Very, very important. Okay. And then inside here, this is where I write the code, or rather the HTML that will allow me to loop through and show all the pets, because this is going to be each one of the pets that we're getting. So each one of these pets here. So I can put everything inside of a list. In fact, I can just remove all of this, say an ordered list, and inside I'm going to create a list. And this list, this is where I put, again, the variables to say, I want just to say pet.name. Or I can just say pet. That also would work. Because remember, the pet object, we have overridden the string method to just give us the name. Either way, but either way works. So I'm going to save this. And look what's going to happen. If I refresh, and voila, you can see we have Clover, Gizmo, Whiskers, Echo, and Bailey. How cool is that? And if I want, of course, because remember, let me just put this, it always puts things in that order, which I don't quite like, but it's okay. I'm going to put this under here, and I can also do, for instance, I can put another HTML tag at the bottom here, still inside of our for loop. It says small. And here, I'm going to say, I want pet.description. I think that was the name we gave it. Let's go check, make sure. It's Command P to just search for a file, all right, or Control P on Windows. And let's say models. I want adoption models. That's the only one I have. And I can see I have description like this. Very good. So I'm going to say, show me the description for the pet as well as we loop through. So save, and if you refresh, you can see now we have Clover, and gives Clover's description, Gizmo and Gizmo description, and all the way to Bailey like that. How wonderful this is. And just like that, we were able to actually get pets from our database by writing this code. Very simply, we didn't have to go and write a SQL query, nothing. We just say pet object.all and got all of our pets. And then we pass that through our context, which is just a dictionary, and we pass it along to our HTML index. And here we have the for loop. We're looping through the pets. Make sure these pets here, this could be anything, but these pets, because we say in pets, this has to be the same name as this key that we're passing as context. Very, very important. And just like that, we're able to get this. So you can see that we're able to show all of the pets that we have, description, and whatever else that we want to add or to show here, we can, because everything is just like an object, right? We just say pet description, a pet photo, whatever it is that we want to, as long as we have that field in the pet model. Okay, so I'm going to remove this right now because I don't need that. But one thing I want to be able to do is I want to be able to, when this pet, I'm going to refresh right now so you can see we just have that. I want to be able to actually make sure that this is clickable, meaning that I want to click, for instance, for Clover and then go to a new route, right, where I can see the details about Clover, because that's usually how web applications work. How do we do that? Well, because it's a new route, that should give you a hint. That means I need to create yet another URL, another view, and set everything up. So let's go back to our code, and I'm going to delete this. So back to our views. Okay, I'm going to create yet another view at the bottom here. Let's call this details, pet details. And for pet details, remember, each time we click, we want to be able to click, we need to go to a different route, a different page, and show the details of that particular clicked pet. Well, with that, we need to figure out, okay, how do we then get that pet to get more information, right? Because we need to know which one was clicked. Well, this is why each one of these pets have an ID. Meaning, here we need to pass request, but also we need to pass the pet ID. So I'm going to say pet ID. You can name whatever you want, it works. So what I need to do here, first of all, is I need to get all the pets like we did here, but not all the pets. I need to pass the actual pet ID that I want to see the details of. How do we do that? Well, there is a function we can do. So pet again, that objects dot what? Get. There's a function called get, which allows me to get a particular pet. And for this, I'm going to pass the ID of this pet is going to be equal to the pet ID, which is being passed here. Right? So now I can say pet, put that in a variable. So now I'm going to have just a specific pet. You will see when I click this Clover, it's going to get the ID of this one and pass it on to the next view, which we'll see, or template, I should say. We'll get there. All right. So now that I have the pet, specific pet, what we'll need to do then is I'm going to just say context, and I'll say pet, and let's pass the pet. And then I'm going to return and render the same thing. In this case, it's going to be pass a request and adoption / let's call this pet underscore detail.html. And don't forget to pass the context. So what's going to be next? Well, we need to create this pet detail. Aha, you get the hang of it. So go back to adoption, templates, pet detail HTML, like that. And I can do the same thing. Just copy what we have from index. I'm going to make it better in a bit here. It's okay. And in this case, so for pet details, of course, I'm going to change all of this, put an H1, and here I'm going to say pet, that name, as such. So we can see, okay, let's go back to views to make sure we have detail, context, everything is good. Okay, so we have the view we created the template, but one more thing that's missing. Right, URLs, because we need to make sure that the URLs of this app knows how to direct everything. So go to URLs. Remember, it has to be of the app, not the project. Okay, and we'll do the same thing we did before. So in this case here, we have this path that we created before. So I'm going to just put this like this, easier to see. And next, I'm going to do the same thing, say path. Aha, now I get to decide how I'm going to put the URL, or what route is going to look, what is the route going to look like. So in this case here, what I can do, I can say pets, okay, / and then because I know that I'm passing an ID, so this ID you will see, it's going to be passed along here, something like this, pets /1, to say this is the ID for 1, the first pet, for instance. That's what's happening. So this is the route. So I can, in our URLs, I'm going to say it's going to be pets / and to pass the ID, to say, okay, next after this / we need to pass the ID. All we say, we put inside of Angular brackets like this, we say we want an int colon, and then we can say whatever we want to say here. Let's say pet ID, like that. Could be anything, but pet ID, that is what we decided. And then we're going to pass a name here, which we can later use. You will see pet detail, like this. So there we go. We have created the URL pattern for our pets to show the pet detail, which says you go to pets / and then you pass the actual ID to get the pet. But I'm forgetting something. Yes, I need to pass the view to be served. So views, and I say dot, say pet details. Make sure that it is indeed that. So this one, pet details. Let me copy and paste it just to make sure, and put comma like that. Okay, so now we have finalized everything. So now when this endpoint is hit, is called, it's going to go ahead and serve the pet detail HTML, this guy here, and along is going to be passing the pet object, which we pass the ID of to get that particular object, and we pass that as a context. Okay, and we had to make sure to have the path set up here, URL pattern, so it knows exactly where to direct and show that view, which is the pet details. So now if I go actually / pets, hit enter, you can see it says pet list name, pet list is not working, pets is not working. What's going on? Let's go ahead and come here and open. And sometimes we need to Control-C and we run again our server to make sure. And you can see, because I made a mistake, this should be pet details. That's the name I gave it. Right? That's the details. All right. And one thing you have to remember, you always have to finish with / like that. Otherwise, you're not going to work. So anytime you create this URL, this route, you have to always end with /. All right. So now I'm going to refresh. Everything's good. And now if I go to, and because the contract, I have to say / and pass the ID. I'm going to say 1. Hit enter, and voila. You can see Clover is working now. It's showing Clover. Because I said I want to go to pets, right? Endpoint, which is this pets here, and then is expecting an ID. Voila. I added ID 1 and gets Clover. If I change that to 2, gets Gizmo. 3, it's going to get Whiskers. Now, if I give a number that it doesn't exist, look what's going to happen. Let's say 12. It's going to say does not exist because, of course, we don't have ID 12 for pets. Right? But you can see that this is working just like this. Very, very good. So next what we'll do, we're going to make it so that it actually works in a sense that we don't want users to come in and click or add manually, right? We want them to come here and make this clickable so they can actually go to see the details for each one of these. Okay, so how do we make it so that these are clickable? So we're showing all of these pets. We want to make sure they are clickable. So we have the infrastructure set up. We have the views, URLs, and everything in templates. We want to make it so that when they click each one of these, they're taken to the details for the clicked pet. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we need to go to the index. So I'm going to Command P and go to index. This is the index HTML, the template. And what we want to do, of course, is as we create all of these paths or loop through all these paths here, I'm going to add an href inside here. So that means go ahead and put a href. Okay, so this be like that, and this actually must be like this. Okay, I'm going to save this real quick. And I'm going to show you if I refresh. Now you can see that all of these are going to be clickable. Very good. But they're not very useful because they don't take us anywhere. So that means then in our href here, we need to direct the users so that when they click, we're going to pass for each one of these paths, we're going to pass the correct URL to get to the details, just like we do when we go / paths / and then pass in the ID, right? To do that here, it's very simple. Make sure that you have Django HTML created. So all you have to do is just say URL and then click that and voila. So now we can create the URL, the actual path that when this href is clicked, is going to serve that page. Very simple. All you have to do is I'm going to say adoption : and then I'm going to say pet details. Now, what's going on here? Well, it turns out, remember, we said, let's go to our view. Well, if you go to our URL, remember I said this app name here, adoption. This is why you want to always do this, because again, you can have many different applications in your project, right? So I'm saying go to adoption, this namespace here, and then what I want you to do is to go to the pet details path. Now you're seeing why I added this name for each one of these path in URL patterns. Because now we can just call this name pet details. Django will know you mean this path here to be served. Very cool. And that's exactly what we're doing here. Go to adoption app and get the pet details URL, the path, and serve me that. But the thing here, you notice, is that in our pet details, but the thing here in our URL, we know that when we serve these pet details, we need to pass the actual pet ID. And how do we pass that along? Because that is very important. Because remember, all we're doing here is we're saying when you click this, we want to go to the details page, but along we need to pass the ID of this clover so we know when we get there, this is what we need. We want the clover information there. We want the clover, in this case, pet there, object and everything. Well, to do that, it's very simple. So we get outside of this we get outside of quotes, and then always we just say ID and sets equal to. Now, because we have access to pet object, look how beautiful this is. I can set it to the pet.id. So now I'm saying go to pet details, but I know pet details, you need to pass the pet ID. And I say, well, the ID is going to be pet.id. And I get pet because, remember, I am inside of a loop and I have access of pet. So now each time, if I refresh this, look what's going to happen. Let's go back. Sometimes we need to go back here, and I'm going to say Control-C and rerun the server just to make sure everything is good. And let's make sure that we call this pet_ID. So this has to be exactly the same, because this is just a variable parameter, really. It has to be exactly the same what we're passing here, but also the same that we've said to be passed here. Okay, that's very important. It has to be consistent. You can name whatever you want, but it has to be consistent. Otherwise, you get some issues. So if I go back and go to main, voila. So now you can see if I hover over, you can see at the bottom here, as I hover over, you can see the numbers are changing to say that indeed we are pointing to the right direction. So if I click Clover, it goes to Clover, and you can see now it says pets 1 for Clover. If I go back, let's say Bailey, you can see pets 5. So like that, we're able to go to the details, and it's working through pet details to show exactly about that particular pet that we are passing along. And so it's easier for now to go to the actual pet details and show other things that we may want to show, such as the description and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and put a P here, and I can say pet.description. I can put in small, like that. If I save and refresh, voila, you can see for each pet we have a description. If I go back, let's go to Whiskers, there's Whiskers description. Go back to Gizmo, there is Gizmo description, and so forth. Just like that, and there you have it, right? It works. Very good. If we want, let's see if this is going to work. I'm going to put an image here because we do have an image. So I'm going to say source, and let's set right away here. And I'm going to say it's going to go to pet, photo, and get the URL. So every photo that we create, we have the actual URL. That's how you get it, okay? And so I can also add the alt. Then let's say add alt, and this is going to be photo of, just say photo of, and then put the variable inside, pet.name. Let's see if it's going to work. Save, refresh. Okay, we have some issues here. We're going to deal with it later. But at least we know that the rest is working. We're able to go to the details for each one of these pets, and we can click, right? We don't no longer have to go to the browser here and add those numbers, those IDs. Now, the reason why we're not able to actually see the image for each one of these pets is because we need to set things up in our project. So let's get rid of all of these for now. So let's open settings. So Command P, go to settings. And what we'll need to do is we need to add the base directory so what we need to do is to add a media root and media URL so that Django knows how to prefix all of the files that we are uploading when we add the pets. It's very simple. Let's go to the bottom here. Right below the static file, or anywhere really, I'm going to add a few variables here. So they're all going to be static, or they're all going to be, so I'm going to say media. This has to be exactly the same. So media underscore URL. And I'm going to say the media URL is going to be /media / like this. And then I'm going to also do the same thing, media. For this, I'm going to say OS. Now OS, it's not imported. This is all Python. So I'm going to say import OS. So it allows us to do all sort of things at the lower level for files, paths, and so forth. So I'm going to use that to join the media URL with something else. So OS, that path, and I'm going to call the join method. I'm going to join our base directory. The base directory I will show you in a second here, and with media as such. Okay, so where is this base directory? Command click, you can see build path inside the project like this. Base directory, subdirectory. Essentially, that's what we're doing here. So this base directory knows the path for everything in our project. So that's why we're using that. As you can see here, it goes to path, resolve, the parent path. So that's why we're using it to append here the base directory with media, so that we have a place where Django is going to be able to have the URL for the files, for all of the files that are uploaded, i.e. all the images for our project. Okay. The next thing we have to do is we need to update the URL configuration so that all is set up. So we need to go to our URLs. So Command P, URLs. Now this has to be URL project, not app, and set that up. So where we have our URL, so here we have our URL patterns. Okay. All I'm going to do at the end here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'm going to say plus to say add to that, say static, and say settings. I'm going to go and get the media. Now all of these are not going to work because we need to import them. Let's go ahead and import them because that's going to facilitate our lives. So at the top here, I'm going to say from Django .config import settings. Okay, and then let's import the static folder. So from Django config URLs, that's static, import static. So all of these static folders or files in this case, and that's about it. So now I can go back here and continue. So static, I'm adding to our URL patterns. So plus static, then I'm going to pass the media underscore URL, and then I'm going to say document root and set that to settings media root. That's all we're doing here. We're just setting up so that now we're passing the static files, in this case, to all of our paths in our project. So they will have access to the media root which we created. The media root here, which knows how to get all the media through the base directory and so forth. Okay, so that's all you have to do, and that's that. So now if I save this, and let's go ahead and rerun our server, make sure all is good. Let's see if I refresh. Okay, if I refresh, it's not going to do. The reason being is because we probably have to go ahead. Okay, we have pets. Everything is good. What I'm going to do, I'm going to re-add them so that the actual media folder or directory is added, because we added this before we had created everything. So this is why we're not seeing anything. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. So let's go back to our Django and our pets. And I'm going to take all of these, and this is Bailey. Got a description. It's a puppy. I'm going to re-add this. So let's go to puppy, and let's go ahead and save. The moment we save, we come back here, and we're going to refresh. And for Bailey, you can see that now I have Bailey. So big one is showing here because they've re-added and looks not that great. So let's go ahead and change that in our code real quick. And I'm going to change the width to be 100 and height for these images to also be 100. So save that. You can see if I refresh, you can see that we have him there. So let's maybe the height about 170. Okay, maybe 150. Okay, that doesn't really matter. We're gonna check it out later. Okay, very good. So that's exactly what we need to do to make sure that this works, because we added them before. So I'm gonna re-add all of them. That way they are able to be seen. Okay, after I added all of them, now if I go back to Clover, you can see it shows Clover. Very good. And Gizmo, we should see Gizmo. So all of these are now being served. Echo, there it is. Whiskers, oh, very cute. And Bailey, of course, it's all working. Very good. So now we're able to set up so that we have everything set up so that we're able to see our images. Unfortunately, we had to go and manually re-add them again because the files themselves we added before, they are being served here, and so the settings doesn't know how to get to them. But in any case, this should be good. Now all should work. Okay. And you can see now we have this media, which this is what it's being served now, right? Because we added and the settings knew what to do. So created this media / pets, and all of them are there. Okay. And looks like I've added a couple more. Got parrot and parrot. Let's see Bailey, Clover, it's a rabbit, Gizmo is a hamster. That's very good. Whiskers. It's a kitten. Echo. It's a parrot. And Bailey is a Labrador. Okay, everything is good. So we're able to see that everything is working. We're able to look at the actual pet and show the image and everything. Now this looks not that great, but we'll get there. We'll make this look nice. Well, we want to make sure also that once the user comes in and looks at the pets and they decided to read a bit more, look at the details, we want to allow them to actually show some interest, meaning to send an email that expresses interest in that pet. Okay? How do we do that? Well, this is when we create a form. So we're going to add a form at the detail level so that users can then click and send some information to the backend so that the admin knows that somebody's interested, and obviously later they can go through the process of vetting and starting the application process. Okay, to do so, it's very simple. We're going to create a form. So under detail here, for now, I'm going to add a form just below. Notice I also added div inside here for our parrot. Okay, we're going to make all of this look better later. So I'm going to say form and as such, and form to close. So a form has an action. This is what needs to happen, or what happens once they say submit. So in this case, and then I'm going to say post, and then the method is going to be post. So inside here, we're going to create our form. So the form is going to be very simple in a sense. So the form is going to be very simple. I'm going to add a button that says, and here we need to pass the CSRF token. So this is actually what Django requires for any form. So to make it so that this for security reasons, So all you have to do, this is very important, say CSRF, because I'm using Django template language here. This has to be passed like this in these tags. Very, very important. And then I'm going to pass as a variable here. It's going to be form. And I can say as _p or as dev. We'll see all of that in action. So I'm going to save that. That's what we have. So next here, that means I have to do something in our view. So Command P, I'm going to go to views, our adoption here. So earlier we just had this. So we're going to use the same pet details because that is the same page where all of this is going to happen. We're going to have the form for them to send information to show interest. So we get the pet, we pass everything in, and we know that works. But what we'll do also inside here, we're going to check through our request object here if this is a post request. So I'm going to say if request that method is equal, now it has to be caps because it comes in as caps, right? It's post. If that's the case, we know that we know that indeed they have clicked on submit, which is a post. We want to post something to the server, in this case, save something. So if that's the case, we are going to create the form. So I'm going to say form. So in that case, we're going to create the form and add all the information in. But this is not going to work so far because we need to actually create the form itself. It's very simple. All we need to do is go at this level here, our adoption level, right? Create the forms.py. It has to be exactly like that. So now I'm going to create an actual form object class, right? So I'm going to say from Django import form, forms like this. And then I'm going to use a class and I'm going to say interest form. That's how you want to append. Interest is the object or the model, and form, append that like that so that it's easy to spot. I'm going to say forms.form. What I'm saying here is that I want to use the form object, form class associated with Django to create a form. This is so easy. The only thing I need to pass along is just an email field for this form. Okay? And then I'm going to say forms email field, and I can pass a few things. For instance, I'm going to say that I want the label. If I hover over, I can pass max length and everything, but I can also pass the labels because it's just going to be rendered as a form. Look at this. I can say label. I want the label to say enter your email to express interest. And I'm going to say required to true because I want this to be something that they must pass. That's it. So now we'll go back to views. Now here I can create the actual form using our interest form, which we need to command period to get that form. So I'm going to say from this folder get forms and import interest form. Like that. So I have our interest form, if I spell it correctly, like that. And the great thing now, in our interest form, when we instantiate it, we can actually pass whatever users have already added. We get that from our request object and get the post data. So we're saying now, fill this interest form, which we created, with whatever we're getting from our form that is here. So users have added stuff, so take all that stuff and put in our forms. That's what I'm saying here. Okay. Oh, now we can check. So I'm going to say if this form dot is valid, if that's true, then we can save. How do we save this information? Well, we say interest, because that is the object, or that is the model. I'm going to say object. We need to import the interest model. Look at that. And say objects. And I'm say create. And then I'm going to pass the pet is going to be equal to what? The pet that we have at the top here, right? That's their interest, that pet, remember? And then email. We're going to get email. How do we get that email from our form? Well, we get the email from this form object, and there is this method called cleaned data, which is just a list or dictionary of some sort where we can get the email like that. And there we go. That's it. So we say form, this object has the clean data dictionary, and we get email, which is going to be exactly what they have entered in the form. And that's what we're going to use to save and create and save. Very good. And once that is done, I'm going to say return, and I'm going to redirect the user to somewhere. For now, I'm going to say to redirect. So redirect, we need to import that from Django Shortcuts redirect, and we want to take them to detail. Actually, let's just take them to index. Let's go to Command P, go to URLs. I want the adoption URL so I know exactly. Yeah, I'm going to say pet list. That's the name I gave for this path. So I can say adoption colon pet list. So essentially I'm saying adoption, the name of the app, pet list. Okay. Now, in any other case, right, if they haven't clicked the submit button, I'm going to say else, go back here. If it's not post, which means is get, I just want to show the actual form. So all I do, I say form is equal to an empty form, which is interest form, like this. Okay. Now, the beauty here is that also I have this context, I have the pet and everything. I'm going to also pass the actual form as form like this, which is going to be the form. So all I'm saying is that when I go to render it and there's nothing, they haven't clicked to send or anything, it's just a get to render it. I'm going to pass the pet as I've been doing, but also I'm going to pass the form, which should have something or not have anything. It's important, this name form here, it's very important to be the same name as I added here. If it was Paulo there, I should have to put Paulo here. And when I say form.asp, I'm saying I want this each field to be shown as a paragraph. I could say as div and so forth, but asp is fine. And again, for every form, we need to have, in this case, the CSRF token, because otherwise this is not going to work. This is a protection security for forms in Django. All right, let's save this and take a look. If I go and refresh, we're going to see that we do have a form. For each one of these, if I go back to Whiskers, we're going to see a form here. Now, let's check it out. I can say, enter your email. I made a mistake here. It's okay. I'm going to say paulo@me.com. I'm going to say submit. It's going to go redirect back to index, which is exactly what I wanted to happen. Right? It went ahead and redirected us to pet list, which is our index. Okay? Now, let's go back here. If you go to admin to see if this worked, I'm going to go to adoption. Let's go to interest. We should have one interest. Click here, and voila. We have paulo.com interested in whiskers. Isn't that great? If I click on here, you can see indeed the pet was added, the relationship. Of course, anybody who sends an email, they're interested. They have to be interested in something. In this case, they're interested in whiskers. And voila. And from here, of course, I can change, but you can see that all of that was done in the back end. All of that was done in the front end. So if I go back here and let's say Bailey and somebody else, let's assume, and this is james@gmail.com. If they submit, they go back here. If I come back here and go to interests, you can see we should have two now. This is James, this is a new one. This is with Paulo. So click here and voila. They're interested in Bailey, and that's their email address. So the admin now can then maybe take this email and send them a message, say, hey, I know you're interested, and so forth. Very good. Now look, something I can do real quick here. I may say, well, I want to add more than just the email here. Maybe I want to say some sort of description. Okay? How do we do that? Well, it's very possible to do that because we can just add. Well, how do we do that to be able to add in the database in the model, the interest model, as well as in the database, as well as in the form? How would you add yet another field for, let's say, a description or a message from the person that is interested? Okay, think about it and see if you can do that before you see my solution. So I hope you were able, let me go ahead and fix. I hope you were able to add the other field for message so they can actually add a message in addition to their email. Let me go ahead and fix this. Enter your EAL, whatever that is. Okay, let's go back. Let's go to forms. This should be enter your email as such. If you save and save this, you can see that was now says email, which is correct. All right, so let's go ahead and see how to add yet another field in our interest form. That way we can allow users to add some sort of, allow users to pass a message, allow users to also enter a little message. So let's go to forms. So we have forms here, but first we're going to go to the model. So Command P, models. And then in our pet models, no, we want to go to our interest model here. I'm going to add a message field. And the same thing, it's going to be models. And I'm going to say text, field as such. Okay, that's all good. And I'm going to say null to be true and blank also true to say that it could be null, could be blank, that is okay. So, okay, we've changed something in our model, which means we need to go ahead and run the migration command, okay? So Python 3, in my case, manage .py, make migrations, adoption, hit enter. Okay, now we have this interest message. We add a field, so it tells us exactly what happens. And now let's go ahead and add that and run the migration. So Python 3 .py migrate. Okay, so that was added. All is good. So we're going to say forms and char field. Okay, and inside here I can also pass this widget, which will allow us to make this char field, this field here, allow us to pass allows us to pass some sort of customization for our char field. So I can actually say here widget, okay, and I'm going to say forms. I want to get a text area, so it's a little bit larger for them to be able to add the message. And of course I'm going to say required to false because it's not required, and I'm going to add a label, as you saw before, that says add a message. And let's say optional as such. Very good. So once we have that, we have the interest form that now includes this message. That means whenever we have it all set up, we should have a message showing, a message text area showing here. Okay, so Control C, and let's rerun this real quick. Okay, so it's running. Let's refresh, and you will see that voila, we have this add message. And it is indeed optional and it looks pretty nice. We will make it look better later, but at least you can see we added this new field. Now that we know that everything is looking good, we need to go back to our view and fix a few things here in our pet details. Okay, we can add something else because we want to be able to get that information from that field. So all we have to do inside of where we are creating our interest, we're passing the pet for that relationship, and we're passing the actual email contents we saw earlier. So you can imagine that now we can actually pass something else, which in this case is going to be our message. So I'm going to say message and set that to form and go to cleaned data dictionary, and I want to get the message. Okay, and because it's optional, I'm going to say empty like that to say if it doesn't have anything, then that's also okay. All right, very good. That's pretty much about it. So now if I go back here, okay, so now I'm going to add an interest here, or I'm going to add the email me@me.com. Of course, in production, you would probably have something better to check for email validity, but that's okay. And next, I'm going to just add a message. I would like to learn more about Bailey. Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and send. Okay, so it looks like we have some issues. Right. Okay. Now, when I say cleaned, now because this is a dictionary, I can actually use the get method, as you know, for dictionary, so that I can pass something else if something else is not working, meaning I can pass a default, right? So in this case, I'm going to say get. I want to get message key. If there's nothing there, just pass an empty string like this. Okay, make sure you do get. It's just a dictionary. Of course, you can always say get to make sure that if there's nothing, then just say empty. So this is the default value of empty string. Okay, so let's save that. And let's go to Gizmo, for instance. Voila, there we go. We can see this is looking good. Say me@gmail.com. Of course, in production, you probably want to make sure that there's some validation for the email, but it's okay. So now to add a message, I would like to learn more about Gizmo. Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and submit, and voila. So we're back here. That's good. But now if we go to admin like this, we should be able to see, let's go to interests. We should see that we have the me at Gmail interested in Gizmo. And voila, you can see that the message is here. So that works. Now you can see it's really simple now that we have everything set up to add anything else to our interest model or our pet model, whatever it is that we want to do. Okay. And then of course we can come to details here. And in this case, we went ahead and included that message field because it's part of our interest model right now. So we need to pass message, say form cleaned data .get, because we want to make sure that we pass a default value if there's nothing there, which is just going to be nothing. Okay, right now, the way our application looks, it's not that great. So we need to find a way to style our application so it looks way better than this. And for that, we're going to use Bootstrap. Now, there are different libraries out there you can use. You can use CSS manually, but I tend not to like that because it's just too much work for nothing. Okay, but we're going to use Bootstrap because this allows us to create very nice user interfaces for our users. So if you go to Bootstrap on Google and you can click here, Bootstrap, and you can see it's really cool. There's documentations and you can see that it's really easy to use. One thing I like to do is you can go to examples, for instance, and it should show you all examples of things that you can do. For instance, for the user interface at least. For instance, you can see I'm going to click on this one. So this is all created with Bootstrap. Okay, so it's a very nice user interface, and you can click on this one and voila, it looks really, really nice. Okay, and so that's what we are going to be using to style our application. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So the thing that you need to look at here, if you go to Bootstrap, there are a few things we can do to install Bootstrap. Now we can use the CDN, which means just a link we can put in our file, HTML file. But what I like to do is Django comes with the Bootstrap app that we can install and use in our application, in our project. So if you go to Django Bootstrap, so just go to Django Bootstrap 5 or Django Bootstrap, you should get to this point here. So I'm going to go back like this, Django Bootstrap, and you go to this read documentation, or you can go to this one here. Let's start with this one here because this is where all of the packages are. So there we go. You can see that we have Django Bootstrap version 5 and all of that. So let me go ahead and zoom all in. It gives us everything that we need to install. So all we need to do is to copy this, pip install, open our terminal, paste that in. Okay, so it's going to install the Bootstrap. Very good. And next thing we need to do, next thing we're going to add as install. Next thing we're going to go to settings.py because it's going to be installed as a Bootstrap. Okay, so we're going to add this Bootstrap 5 into installed apps in settings. Command P, settings, go all the way to where we have our apps. Okay, and let's go ahead and check it out. And next, what we'll do, I'm gonna copy this and put in one of our templates. So let's go ahead and find index, and then at the top, inside of header, we just put load Bootstrap 5. And I'm going to add a few things just to make sure this works. For now, let me just go ahead and copy. For now, I'm just going to add this class in one here just to see what's going to happen. Okay, so if all is well, we should be able to see something different somewhere here, because this is where we are. Okay, I'm going to refresh. Okay, nothing is working, so let's go ahead and open, and let's go ahead and rerun our server. Okay, everything is good. And the other thing we need to pass along here, it's going to be, I'm going to copy and paste here so you have it, the bootstrap underscore CSS, as well as the JavaScript as well. So all of this is going to allow us to actually use bootstrap. So I'm going to save this. Now if I come here and refresh, you can see that this is working, because we can see that there is styling now. Okay, so make sure that you pass load bootstrap 5 and then CSS as well as JavaScript. All right, so I know that it's working, and so I'm not going to use that. What I can do is I'm not going to go, just going to go ahead and remove that altogether. So all I wanted to make sure is that this works. Now if I refresh, of course, this is going to go back to what it was, but you can see there's some differences because we're using bootstrap. Okay, very good. So make sure that bootstrap is working, and then I'll see you next. So when you're building web applications in general, usually you want to have a look that is very consistent with your applications. Usually you want to have a structured way of displaying your website, meaning you want a consistent look. So essentially we want to have an navbar that every page in this project will have that. As well as sometimes if you want to, you can have a footer. So that's what we're going to do. Now, you will see that there's things that are constant, which means there are layouts, things that we're going to show to the user that are constant, which means every page should have. Then that means we need to restructure a few things. So in Django, what you want to do is you want to create what we call a base HTML. This base HTML is going to have the consistent look, or the pieces of HTML that will be consistent across the entire project. Okay, so what we'll do here is I'm going to create in our adaptions here, I'm going to create a new file, index file, a new HTML file called base.html. So this base.html is going to get, it will have the base of all of the structure for the entire application when it comes to the user interface. I'm going to go to index.html. I'm going to copy everything that is inside there and go back to base and get rid of all of these other ones that we don't need. Okay, and I'm going to paste all of that there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave this load bootstrap, all of the bootstrap things, and I'm going to change a few things here. So let me just delete all of the unordered list as such. So I'm going to add at the top here a nav tag. This is for navigation. Okay. And then I'm going to add here a main. And because why not, I'm going to also add a footer HTML tag here. So for a main tag here, let me go ahead and add some classes here. Now these are all, now these classes here are added for Bootstrap, so Bootstrap will know how to read this and style accordingly. Okay, so I'm going to say container, and I'm going to say margin top, about, and for footer, I'm going to say class, just say footer as such, empty-auto, to say margin top is going to be just flexible, and we're going to do more there. And inside here, I'm also going to add a div and add a class here called container. Okay, and I'm going to add a span, and this one I'm going to say class also container, and I'm going to add something like that. Add adoption. All rights reserved. So, okay, this is going to be on the footer. Very good. And what will happen here, because this is going to be the base class, we'll see in a bit here, is in our main, inside here, I'm going to put these tags. So I'm going to say block as such. So this block I'm going to call content and escape a few times to get rid of everything. Okay, very good. So this is going to be the placeholder, which is going to render whatever we pass in along here. We'll see in a second. So for now, that's all good. So what we'll do then, because this is going to be base HTML, in any other HTML, we're going to use this base HTML to render the skeleton of this page. Okay, so I'm going to go to index. Let's leave everything as is, and I'm going to get rid of this because this is all going to be coming in from our base HTML anyway. But for us to be able to use base HTML, we need to import it. In Django, it's called extending. So all I need to do really is I'm going to get rid of everything because we don't need any of that. This is inside of an index. So I'm just going to read all of this, get rid of all this markup, all of it, and we can leave just this, what we have here. Okay. All right, but at the top here, I am going to say extends. So you can see now I'm going to say base.html. So that means we are extending, inheriting everything from base HTML to our index. Okay. And next I'm going to load the Django bootstrap. So load Django bootstrap 5, I believe. Let's go back to base. So I'm going to load exactly this. Okay, just like that. And next, what I will do, remember in our base here, we said that in our main, we have this block content. Well, I need to create this block content as well here. So that way it knows, that way Django, that way Bootstrap will know, that way Django will know what to dynamically add to this block content here. So this is going to be the contents that we're going to show here. So I'm going to put, say, block and content as such, escape a few times, and now I can put all of this inside of this block. Now it has to be this way, that way it will know what to put inside of this main container inside here. That's why this is empty. We're saying now, since we are extending baseline or base HTML, whatever we put inside of the content is going to be showing. So let's go ahead and save and see if this is going to work something. So this is fine. Looks like base HTML is not found. The reason why is because we need to actually go and say adoption / like this, because it needs to know where to go. Adoption base HTML. Okay, let's save. Now if we refresh, voila, you can see we have indeed the footer and we have the contents. So this is being shown there right now, and I can do the same thing to show you to our details. Command P, details, get rid of everything. Okay, let's go back to our index. I'm going to just copy all of that, put at the top. Very good. And remember, we need to put our block content, escape a few times, and then get everything, all this markup, put that inside of this content here. This is very important for it all to know what to do. So if I save this, now if I go to click here, details, looks like we have issues, right? Block tag name content appears more than once. Okay, let's see. Right, I have one too many. Okay, let's save that. Refresh and look at that. Now it looks way, way better, even though we haven't done much, but now it's structured a little bit better. Okay, so any page that we create, we do the same thing. We're now reusing some code here, which is very important. So every page, again, as you see here, this one will have at the bottom There we go, pet adoption. This is our footer. Next, let's go ahead and add a nav bar. Now, the great thing here, if you go to Bootstrap again, I can search for something. I'm going to say nav bar, hit enter. So if you look at nav bar, make this a little bit larger. I'm going to scroll all the way down, and it shows exactly. For instance, this is one of the nav bars we can use with a drop down and so forth. Very cool. We can go all the way down. This is another kind of nav bar. Okay, this is another nav bar. We can add an icon and all these things. So with Bootstrap, you can do many, many different things. Look at that. And if you want to add a form, that's really good. So let's go back. I think this one is good. I'm just going to go ahead and copy. And let's go to our base. Get rid of all that. So for our base here, where we have this nav bar, I'm actually going to just paste in everything else. So there's a lot there. No worries. We will delete what we don't need. But I'm going to just go ahead and add a few things. So in this case here, I'm going to call this adoption or pet adoption. As such, if I save this, look what's going to happen. So I'm going to go back to here. And if I refresh, voila. Very, very cool. So the beauty is, because this is all on the base, what will happen now, if I go to Clover, you can see that this stays there, which is really, really handy, isn't it? Okay, let's go ahead and restructure a few things on our bar here. Now, don't worry about all these things. You can actually go here and search nav bar and pick whatever else you want. Doesn't really matter what. I just want to give you a few options and know about Bootstrap. It's really handy, and we're not going to spend too much time explaining everything. You can learn more about. You can research more. You can learn more about this on your own. Okay, that's totally fine. Okay, so let's just check a few things out here. So we can see that this is indeed an href, which when clicked, we want to make sure that perhaps we go back to index. Now, right now, it doesn't go anywhere. That's fine. And so what I want to do now is, let's go back here. Let's see what else can we do. Okay, so it looks like this says home. So one thing I notice is that in one of these, I should have this showing, but somehow here we can't quite see. It's just white, but it's still there. So if I click, you can see it's showing the home and drop downs and everything, right? But I'm not able to actually see. I'm not sure why. One of the things is because we install the Bootstrap as an app, let's see if we can install a different one, okay? Because the one that we've installed seems to be giving us some issues. So let me open our terminal, and we're going to install this different one here. So I'm going to say pip install Django, okay, Django dash bootstrap and dash v5 bootstrap 5. Let's go ahead and install that version there. Okay, just minor differences. And next, I need to go back to our settings, and instead of this one here, let's say bootstrap. Let's say Django underscore bootstrap. Okay, this is probably best version. And say 5. And this is, just to be consistent, this is going to be third-party apps. Okay, so this is Django Bootstrap, just a different one than the one we had installed before. And if that happens, then that means we have to change a few things. Now, instead of calling Bootstrap 5 like this, we need to say Django underscore bootstrap 5. And of course, make sure we still are also applying the Bootstrap CSS and JavaScript. All right. And copy that and go to index just to make sure. Let's load Bootstrap 5 like this, and everything else stays the same. Okay, voila. So that was one thing that we needed to do because the previous version probably had some issues with CSS and so forth. So this is way better. So now you can see that this actually works, which is exactly what is supposed to happen. Okay, of course this is dark mode, but that's okay. And there we go. All right. So we don't need most of these things here, so I can just go ahead and get rid of that. To get rid of that, let's go to our base, and let's see. Let's get rid of some of these nav items. I don't need this drop down. And I don't need that. I don't need this form. Okay, let's save now and see. Let's refresh. Click. Okay, very good. So they're just home there. Very good. So in this case, for our home, I can just say show all paths, something like this. Come back here. I'm gonna refresh. Of course, you can see show all paths. Now, if indeed you are zoomed out, like a normal view, you're going to see that this is how it's going to look like. There show all paths, and this is potentially the logo. Okay, so now it looks way better. So now the beauty also is that if I make this larger, and this is also, and now this is also responsive, which means depending on the device size, it will go ahead and show that exactly. Okay, so still have that problem here because we need to add the Bootstrap 5, which is the one that we need. Let's go to details. And instead of that, this has to be Django _ Bootstrap 5. All right, so save that, and after refresh details, I should be able to see that. Okay, but most importantly, we still have our navbar. Okay, so next I'm going to go back to Bootstrap, and I want something that will show a list. So I'm going to use this list class group here, which is going to show something like this, which is way better than what we have here when we go to our main, when we are under our index. So let's go ahead and, okay, so what I want to do now is I want to make sure that we show cards containing. Now, this is not very nice. So what I want to do is I want to be able to show some sort of an image and the name of the bunny. So when they clicked, then they're going to go do the same thing here to show the details. Okay, so this is just a list, not very nice. All right, so that means we go to our index, and I'm going to change a few things here. Let's add a div real quick. And I'm going to add everything. That for loop in there. Okay, very good. So inside of our for loop here, I'm going to add another div. I'm going to enclose everything as such. And for this div, remember, you're going to have access to all of this, so you don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to pass here a class name. This is all Bootstrap, of course. So card, margin bottom, I'm going to give a 3, and mx, I'm going to auto as such. And I'm going to pass a style here, inline style, say max, width, I want this to be about 540 pixel as such. Okay, very good. And then let me create a row here. So div and say class row is 0 like this. And put that inside there. And then inside of this row, for each row, I'm going to say another div. And put it as another div. And I'm going to put another class here. That's going to be column AMD. But for the flex, I'm going to justify content center. Okay. And inside here, of course, I'm going to put an if statement to say if the pet image, right, if pet has an image, then I'm going to add an image. So I'm going to say img, pass in a source. Now this source is going to be passing as a variable. It's going to be pet.image.url. So this is how you get the image URL. You say the image, in this case, is the field, and then each image will have an URL. Okay? And then we're going to add an alt. And for the alt, I'm just going to go ahead and pass another variable here. I'm just going to say pet.name. And I'm going to pass a class here that will help with fluidity of this image, the way it's rendered and everything. I want to be rounded shadow. Now, if we don't have, I'm going to save this. If there is no image, I'm going to actually add a. Now, if you can see that if we don't have an image, what I will do is I'm going to say else. If that's the case, I'm just going to add a placeholder image, so it has the same class and everything. There we go. And we have the end here. I'm just going to save here and see what's going to happen. So if I refresh now, okay, you can see that it says name and all of that. All right, so it's not getting the actual image. Let's go back to see. Let's go to pet detail to see how do we get the image. So pet photo, we call the photo, not image. So let's go back. Say photo, that's the field. Such. Okay, let's save. And voila, you can see too large. Let's go ahead and perhaps make these a little bit smaller. Okay. All right. It's looking pretty good. Okay, let's continue. So remove that, and we're going to add yet another div here. And put that there. Let's say a class. Say call MD about 8. And inside put another div. Now remember, this has nothing to do with Django, but I just want to make this look good. So I'm going to say card dash body. So this is going to create a nice card. So let's put that inside there. And for that, let's go ahead and put some information. For instance, I want to put an H5. And inside here, this is going to be a class, let's say card title, and let's just say pet.name. So essentially that could have just been pet, that's okay. And then at the bottom, I'm going to put a paragraph. And I'm going to say description. And then let's just copy that and have another P here, the path, a class, which is going to be card text. and we pass pet.description. And I'm going to duplicate that. So you say Option, Shift, arrow down. And what I want to add here is just something different. So this is going to be card text, or text, let's just say text, the class, body, secondary, and I just want to say get the date added, I think. Date added. Let's go back to our models, Command P, and date submitted. This is the field that I want. No, actually this is, for each pet I don't have the date submitted. Okay, no worries. So that means we don't have to add that then. That's fine. So I'm going to just remove that. Very good. So in this case here, for our pet description, because this is going to be here, I don't want users to be able to do what, I don't want users to see everything about the description. So what you can do using filter, right? You can filter using filters. You can actually change the amount of information you want to show. So all you do, you put, in this case, the pipe, and then say truncate chars, and you say you want about 50. Okay, to say just want to show the first 50 characters. If I save this and refresh, look at this. All right, looks really good. Now, maybe we should make this a little bit smaller. Let's see how this is going to look. This is looking really good. And there's that one there. And I'm going to change this. Let's go back here. Instead of a list, let's say small. And I'm going to just say view that pet name details. Such, let's save that. Okay, that looks way better. Very good. So everything still works. I can go ahead and click here. I can go and see the details. Go back, gizmo, look like this. Okay, if I make this smaller, so to see how things would work, this is how things actually would work. Now we have some issues here, but we'll go and fix that later. Okay, now one thing I noticed here, just preference. I don't like the way this looks. In fact, I think it'd be better to have some sort of a grid that will just put everything together here. Now remember, this is just Bootstrap. You don't have to worry about this. This is just me speaking. This is just me thinking out loud. So I'm going to change a few things here, this whole style, so it looks the way I want it to look. Okay, after rearranging a few things here, you can see this is way better. I like it. I like it very much. And looks very nice. I can go details and there. Okay, very good. So one next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add some sort of padding around this and maybe some text at the top. And I'm going to go to the base, Command P, base HTML, and I'm going to add another block somewhere. So inside of our main, where we're showing everything, here I'm going to put at the top here this page header. So this would mean that anywhere we add this page header, it's going to be rendered here. Okay, so I'm going to give it a little border bottom and margin bottom, padding bottom, and all that stuff, and enclose everything. So now if I save this, if I refresh, of course nothing is showing, but you can see that we have that nice delimiter there. Okay, let me go ahead and go to the index, and at the top here, right, at the top of the block, I'm going to add another block, and this is the page header, which means now I can pass here what I want for the page header to have. So I'm going to put inside of H3 or H4 perhaps, say meet our friends. So refresh and you can see it says meet our friends, and then this shows there. Okay, and maybe H3 Very good. That looks really nice. And you can see all of our friends here. So as we add more friends, they're going to be showing here. So this looks great. And they can go ahead and click details and go ahead and see the details. Okay. Next, we're going to look at putting together. Next, we're going to look at making this even better. If we go to our pet details, come here, you can see that it doesn't look that great. Let's start with the form to make it look better. Luckily, with Bootstrap, we can use the classes for our form and everything. But with Bootstrap, we can actually use Bootstrap form itself. For our form here, I'm going to put inside of a div. And let's give it a class. Say container. And I'm going to give it margin top about 4. Let's refresh. Okay, that looks a little bit nice. Okay, and inside here, I'm going to use actually Bootstrap to create this form. Okay, it's really simple using Bootstrap 5. So all we have to do really is to add, I'm going to remove this. And I'm going to say, let's put a tag here. Okay, Bootstrap form and pass the form as such. And for the button, we can also do the same. So I'm just going to go get the button real quick. And we say Bootstrap button, and we can pass the type, which is submit, content. And for the content, we're going to say submit like this. All right. So I'm going to save that and you come here and voila. Look at that. Just like that, we have a very nice form that says submit. It looks like this button is still there. Let's remove that button. Okay. And refresh. You can see that looks way, way better. All right. Now let's see what we can do to make this even better, right? So we have the image, but that's not good. Let's perhaps add a card and make it look better. Okay, so all I did here really, I actually removed everything and added a card and a row and everything. So essentially, I'm checking if we have a pet object coming in, and I create a div class, create a nice column and make it center, as you can see here. And then I check if there is a photo, right? If there is a photo, then I'm going to go ahead and pull the photo and add in that image tag, as well as add an alt, which is just going to be the name of the image. And I added a class here just to add some rounded and add some shadow around it. Okay, and if there's no image, we're just going to add this placeholder image here, as you see there, the same thing. And then I'm going to add a card which will have a title. So the title is going to be the pet name, and I have a description, and then I actually pass the description there. Now I'm going to add the full description, right? Because this is details. All right, and so if we don't have any pets, so I'm just going to say no pet found, and I'm going to end everything. And then of course at the bottom we have here the form that allows users to add a form, that allows users to, of course, show interest. And I can put here some sort of block, say page header, and I'm just going to say something like h4, say interested, send us an email. Okay, I can say interested in adopting and pass in variables here, pet.name or just pet, that's fine. Okay, send us an email. So I'm going to save this. Let's see what's going to look like. If I refresh, you can see interested in adopting Clover, send us an email. That should be actually at the bottom, so let me move that around. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look. And there you have it. It looks really nice. Now we have the image of Clover, description, there it is, and enter email to express interest, and let's see if this works. Me again at gmail.com. I like Clover. How can I adopt him? Thanks. Okay, so if I say submit, voila, submitted, and takes us back to the index page. Very good. And of course, in the back end, you know by now that should have been shown. All right. Okay, one thing I want to be able to do is I want to be able to click this pet adoption here, and wherever we are, let's say we go to whiskers, okay, and we decided to go back. So I want to make it so that when we click on pet adoption, we go back to the index, okay, to show the main page. Okay, so all of that is going to be inside of base. So Command P, look for base HTML. And we're going to see where we have Command F, let's say pet, this guy here. So now here, I'm going to pass a URL. So I'm going to say URL, and the URL is going to be adoption. And I believe, let's go back, Command P, URLs, just to make sure. To go to the index, we call this pet list. Now let's just say index. I think it's way better that way. Okay, so let's go to index. So adoption colon index as such. If you save, and I'm going to refresh, if you click here, it should get us back to the index page where it's going to show everything. Okay. Now I added this show all pets here. Now this is something you can work on if you want to do something else, but I just added there because you may want to have something similar. But because we are showing all the pets right in front here, this is kind of redundant. But I'm going to leave that there in case you want to add other navigations there. Okay, everything is looking really good. And one thing I want to do here is make this footer a little bit better and maybe centered as well. That's very simple. Let's go to our base, all the way down, and I'm going to add a little bit more to this div footer here, our class. So py, it's padding the y direction. In background, I'm going to say light, and I'm going to say auto for the, like that. I'm going to refresh, and it looks way better. So let's go ahead and add some sort of a inviting message, right? Because this is our index main page, so we want to make sure that there's some text that is kind of inviting. Right, let's go back to our code. It's going to have inside of our, let's go index HTML. Let me add another div here. Sorry, class container, and inside let's add another div. Call D about 12, okay, just to make everything look good. Let's add an H3. Add a bootstrap class called display -4 that says pet adoption, okay. And we're going to add a paragraph here. Add a class. Call this lead. Okay. Okay, here I'm going to have a text that says, welcome to, put an I here, italic, say adoption, or pet adoption. And I'm going to paste all of that information here. I have a lot of text. Okay, just save some text around. Let's go back here, refresh, And there we go. And let's make this even better by adding something else here. For this top one, instead of just having container, let's change this to, let's say pad 3, margin bottom 4. I'm going to add a background, light, add a border, round, and 3. So not too thick. Okay, that looks way nicer. Look at that. Okay, so they can see, meet our friends. Let's just move this. It's not necessary. I'm going to cut that and add somewhere there. Okay, meet our friends. That looks really nice. Okay, so let's make this a little bit smaller. And you can see this looks very nice. So we have show our pets, doesn't do much, but you can make that work. And then we have this pet adoption. Welcome to pet adoption. You get away to meeting the most lovable companions. Our mission is to connect these wonderful animals and all that great stuff. Okay, and then of course meet our friends, and people can come in and go to details, look at this guy. Okay, they can go back and look and so forth. So you're able in this case to create a full-fledged application here, pet adoption, that allows users to come in and look at all the pets that are available, and they can look at details and look at and read a little bit more about each pet, their description, and if they want, they can go ahead and enter an email and a message. So let's say paolo@gmail.com. I like this cute pet. How can I adopt him? Okay, and of course they can go ahead and say submit. Right, now we have some issues here because this pet list not found. Remember, I changed that pattern name to something else. So let's go back to our details, Command P, pet details, and this is important because it tells us exactly what's happening. So wherever we need to go to views, because that's where we are redirecting. So instead of pet list, it is actually index, because that's what we change it to. In case you don't remember, let's go to URLs, and you can see I changed this to index to go to the index, right? So there we go. Very good. So now that should have worked, but let's go back here and resend again. You can see that gets us back to the index. And if I go to the back end, the admin, I'll be able to see that in interest, I should have a few interests here. And I think this is the latest one, either one. I think this is the one. And oh, that's not the one. Let's see. I think that's the one. Okay, there we go. So that's the one. That is the one I sent. And of course, this is the back end. An admin can come here and look and say, okay, this is the person, and then perhaps send a message to this person to start the process. Obviously, there's so much that can be done here in terms of making this even a more robust pet adoption application web app by adding authentication, maybe also adding ways for pet adoption agencies to create their own accounts so they can post their pets here, right? And also making so that each user that comes in must create an account to be able to adopt a pet, right? So that way, if they want to adopt more than one pet, they can, as long as they have an account. So there's so much that can be done. A more detailed walkthrough Django framework and how to build massive, scalable, and enterprise even applications web app. All of that is in my Django complete course, right? Where I go through 0 to hero. So if you want to learn more about how to build something like this, but with more details, more robust, more things such as authentication, validations, and even being able to deploy your Django full-fledged application to Heroku or to a web server, then you should take a look at the course. So go ahead and click the link in the description below, and that should take you to the course to enroll right away and get started building awesome applications with Django.